you. Good evening or good afternoon and welcome to the April 18th, 2023 meeting of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. I just want to take a moment to thank the members of the commission and the staff of McMinnville Water and Light for adjusting this meeting time to accommodate a rigorous council schedule right now in terms of some things that are going through at the city level, and we greatly appreciate the flexibility is greatly appreciated.
Madam Mayor, we're happy to be here.
Yeah, I was going to make that comment.
Yeah, well, you're welcome to join us. Noted. I would ask our clerk Trina McManus to do a roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor Drapkin,
Here.
Commissioner Tinkersley,
Here.
Commissioner Gormley,
Here.
Commissioner Christensen is excused this afternoon, and Commissioner Tate.
Here. Thank you so much. We'll now move into our consent agenda. Have all commissioners had an opportunity to review the consent agenda, and does anyone wish to have any item removed?
No.
No.
I'd move for adoption of consent agenda.
I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley
Second.
and a second from Chair Tankersley. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda passes unanimously. And have all commissioners had an opportunity to review accounts payable and purchasing
Yes, we have,
reports?
yes.
Yes. Wonderful. Any questions there? No. Fantastic. And then we're going to go right into our consultant and partner reports, and I would welcome our forester to give us a report. Is Brent joining us, or do we have someone else? Oh, you're on Zoom. So welcome, Brent.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we're continuing to fight the unprecedented snow level in the watershed. We got all our interplanting done at the lower elevation units, and last year's sales were higher end of the watershed in terms of elevation, and so we've been pretty well snowed out of that area the entire planting season, and it was looking like it was going to open up today. We got the road plowed over the weekend. The units were clear, but then we got another 4 or 6 inches last night. So we'll see. I think it's coming and going quicker. It's going to come off, but we'll continue to look at it daily and hopefully be done with by the end of April.
Would this be a good time for the commission to come up and visit the watershed?
Yeah, bring your
Snowboarding
inner tube.
Yeah.
Bring your inner tube.
You can't go fishing, but snowboarding.
Well, and it's funny because it's just at that top end where we just haven't operated up there for years, really, and so it hasn't been an issue. And sometimes we've planted early, and then the snow comes in on top of the trees, and we get by. But this time we've got caught there with our main units being snowbound the entire time. So we're just monitoring it closely, pretty much daily now, and everybody's ready to go. Contractor and seedlings are there, so we'll see what happens. But should open up here and be done within a few weeks. 2023 sales also are affected a little bit by those conditions up there. We want to get started on the 187 road, but it's up. It's another unit adjacent to the power line up there, and so it'll probably start more towards the summer. The 303 road sale was kicked off last week. They started cutting in there, and so we're in good shape to be on schedule. Otherwise, we're currently evaluating road maintenance and silviculture projects that are associated with this year's sale program. Any questions?
No questions.
No questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Would you like a staff introduction before?
I think Trina,
Trina, would you like to do an introduction before we welcome John Gillarducci to the room?
Sure. Just as a quick recap, back in September of 2021, the commission approved a personal services agreement with Financial Consulting Solutions to provide services for a system development charge study for the water utility. So staff has been working with FCS over the last few months to gather all the information needed, and they've finalized the results, and they are here this evening on Zoom to present the results to the commission and answer any questions that you might have. So I'd like to introduce Doug Gabbard and John Ghilarducci from FCS. And I believe that John will kick us off and share their results with us today.
We're gonna thank you very much, Trina, and thank you, board. We're gonna tag team it, I can see Doug working to share his screen right now. But I'll kick us off with a little bit of background about system development charges. I know that McMinnville Water and Light has not had a system development charge in place for the water service. So we're gonna give you a little bit of a flyover about the rules, and then Doug will walk us through the calculations, and we've got some comparable SDCs to show you, and so quite a bit of information for you this afternoon. You can go right in. Yeah, thanks, Doug. So some key things to keep in mind about system development charges. These are the one-time fees paid at the time of development by new development. So your existing customer base does not pay system development charges unless they are redeveloping into something that places a larger impact or demand on the water system in the way of a larger water meter. But for the most part, already developed property does not pay these. By law, SDCs are authorized for water, wastewater, stormwater, transportation, and parks, and only those 5 services. We'll show you at the end of this presentation what the city imposes for a couple of these, but of course our topic this afternoon is water, because that's your business. SDCs are for capital construction only, so we calculate them based on the cost of assets and capital projects to be built. And then you can only spend the money on capital projects, with one small exception. They have 2 components generally, and in this case, one piece is a buy into existing infrastructure that may have capacity available for growth. And then the second piece is a future-looking component based on the cost of planned projects that will add system capacity. So, and then that last one is just to clarify that an SDC is supposed to be for a share of water system capacity, the big stuff. It's not the meter, so it has nothing to do with the meter installation. This is about a share of system capacity. So the law is pretty straightforward. We follow it. We're very familiar with it. We follow it very carefully. There's some case law out there that helps provide guardrails for us. But all in all, it's a really good recipe for what we have to include and consider when we calculate a system development charge. And again, it just reinforces that these are capital related and can only be spent on capital improvements. So the math, as you will see in a minute, is pretty straightforward. The devil is in the details, as usual. That component, which is based on the existing system, is called the reimbursement fee. And what we do when we calculate the reimbursement fee is we try to isolate the cost of any unused capacity in the existing system that's available for future users, and we divide that cost by the growth that it will serve, and that gives us our reimbursement fee with a few adjustments. The improvement fee is the future-looking component, and if you picture a long list of capital projects, there's a growth-related capacity increasing share of each project that is eligible for inclusion. And the sum total of all those growth-related costs, again, divided by the growth that it will serve, gives us our improvement fee. And together, they're intended to represent that share of capacity, system capacity needed to serve that new increment of development. And with that, Doug will take us through the math.
Indeed, I will. And we're going to begin in the denominator of this calculation with the growth in system demand. So in order to know what growth is going to look like, you have to start with knowing where you are with your customer base. And so we collected some customer statistics from the utility, and we ran each one of those connections through a flow factor that translates meter size into actual hydraulic capacity, which is a very standard way in the industry of measuring capacity. And at the time we did this, we had 14,006 meter capacity equivalents. And given that you have your current max day demand, this number goes down to here, your maximum day demand is 11.25 million gallons per day. We maintain that ratio and applied it to a build out scenario of maximum daily demand of 30 million gallons per day. What that means is we're going to have in the future, whenever that future year is, and we don't care what year that is, we just care that it's whenever you reach 30 million gallons of demand, you're going to have 37,348 meter capacity equivalents at that time, which is 23,343 more than you have now, which is a lot of growth. Another way to put that is that by the time you reach build out, 63% of the customers you will have then of the service connections don't exist yet. So this is a point that we're going to come back to in the next couple of slides, that we're planning for a lot of growth. Wanted to add that we also looked at a zone SDC for what you're calling zone 2. The result of this is a little anticlimactic, so I won't spend too much time on it. But we have the Jacob study that set us up with all the growth assumptions for that zone 2. But you'll see why I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. So we're planning for a lot of growth. That means we need a lot of projects, and your total project list is almost $258 million. And what you see on the screen right now is not the project list, it is a summary of the project list. Each one of these rows is a category with the total costs and eligible costs behind that, and these are summarized here. Now, you'll notice a lot of different percentages for eligibility. Remember that eligibility is the portion of a project cost that can be attributed to future users. In some cases, those are 100%. In some cases, there's something less than that, and that has to do with the size, if we're talking about pipe, the size of pipe, or other version of capacity measurement. But if you're replacing, for example, a 4-inch pipe with an 8-inch pipe, there's a certain amount of capacity in that new pipe that is just replacing the old, but a certain amount of capacity that is new and larger. And so we want to capture the new and larger in the SDC, and that's what these eligibility percentages are all about. And so when we do those percentages on a project by project basis, you end up with an overall average eligibility of about 65%, which takes your $258 million project list down to an eligible cost of about $168 million. You'll notice that some of these eligibility percentages are 0. That doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they're not adding growth, because they are adding capacity in many cases. That has to do with the anticipated funding source. And so we had been advised that development is expected to contribute a number of these assets, and for assets that are expected to be contributed or constructed by developers, we can't ask developers to pay again for that in the SDC. And so to avoid that kind of double dipping, we take them out of the computation. You'll notice here, doing a little foreshadowing here, the zone 2 lines have been zeroed out for precisely that reason, which leads to the anticlimactic result of the zone 2 SDC calculation. Now you might be thinking, with such a large number here in the planned project, surely there's must not be any available capacity in your existing assets that you can use, but that would be wrong. There's actually quite a bit of existing capacity in your system. We're just planning for that many new users. But we went through your existing assets and we applied in a very similar way to the eligibility percentage on the previous slide. This is the portion of the capacity in each function that is available for future users. And you'll notice that some of these are 62.5%, which happens to be equal to that growth share I showed you earlier on that growth slide. That's not an accident. That's a pretty common thing. What that tells you is that each of those functions where that is the case has capacity available to build out. And so since 62.5% of those connections haven't shown up yet, that is the amount that is reimbursable. And so you take a total asset cost of about $110 million. Roughly half of that is available for future growth, which leaves you with about $57 million in reimbursable capacity. You'll notice these last couple of acronyms down here that may look a little confusing to you. This second to last one, CWIP, construction work in process. That is the construction work that was in process at the time this list was done, and we gave it the allowable portion of kind of the weighted average of everything above it. Similarly, remember when I said on the project list that we had to deduct out anything that was contributed by a developer? Well, here's how that looks on the reimbursement list. Anything that the developer in the past contributed has to be deducted out of the reimbursement cost basis. CIAC, contribution in aid of construction. I believe it's been a long time since I've said that one. So we put that all together, and here's what you got. An improvement fee cost basis of a little over 168 million, a reimbursement fee cost basis of a little over 57 million, give you a total cost basis in excess of $225 million. We're going to divide that by those 23,000 meter capacity equivalents that I showed you on the growth slide. And this leaves you with a improvement fee of $7,200 per MCE, a reimbursement fee of nearly $2,500. And we're adding in, as has been our custom the last time that we worked with you, we're allocating 5% of the cost basis for compliance fee. This represents costs that the utility expends to keep your SDC system legal. So certainly the cost of what we're doing right now, putting together a methodology, but also this could be fractional FTEs of people who are involved in doing the accounting of the program or estimating costs for the development community. And this is the portion of the fee that you can safely send back to your general fund to reimburse for those costs. You remember a few minutes ago, this is not meant to be a quiz, but John said to you that this fee is mainly for capital with one small exception. Well, this is the one small exception, is that you can reimburse yourself operating costs if they are related to compliance. So what that leaves you with in total is an SDC of just over $10,000 per meter capacity equivalent, or a 3/4 inch meter in this case is what a meter capacity equivalent is, with a kind of the base meter for single family residence. We calculated the area specific charge, but your zone 2 overlay kind of went away when we discovered that those projects were going to be contributed by developers. So there really is no area specific SDC available. So we put your calculated uniform charge in the context of other jurisdictions and what they are currently charging. We tried to find ones that were relevant, but this kind of slide always sparks some controversy about which ones when it were included, which ones weren't. So this is just meant to give you a flavor that yes, some are much higher, some are much lower, and here you are in the middle of that list. So let's talk for a minute about implementation. Where are we going to go with this? The one thing that I haven't said at all yet, but it bears emphasizing, is that a calculated SDC is a ceiling and not a mandate. So the SDC law is mostly concerned about preventing the overcharging of development. So what we calculate is what we believe is the maximum defensible charge that you could impose if you wanted to, but you don't have to. You can charge anything below or up to that calculated SDC. You don't need a finding, you don't need a reason, you don't have to explain your rationale. You can pick a number if you want to. You are safe in charging as much as that calculated number, but you don't have to. Now, a lot of our clients find that a good compromise between dumping a huge new charge onto development and still getting the revenue that they need is to phase in a new SDC or to phase in a newly increased SDC. There's an infinite number of ways to do this. Let me just suggest a couple to you. One is you can pick an SDC that is lower or perhaps much lower than the allowable charge that we have calculated. You can implement that, and then you can come back and you could implement higher later using under the guise of the same methodology. And you can look at that and implement it separately and look at it each individual time if you want to. Now, what some of our clients have done is some of our clients have kind of put this on autopilot, where they have implemented a multi-year phase-in schedule from the beginning, which it doesn't necessarily tie their hands, because anything they do with a resolution can be undone with a resolution, but it creates a default choice that if they don't come back to it, the SDC is going to continue to rise along the predetermined schedule. One of our clients went so far as to create, I believe it was a 20-year phase in, because the SDC that we calculated for them was so much higher than they were willing to implement at the time. But they decided that they were just going to step it up gradually for many years on autopilot. And that creates a situation where you can jump off of that anytime you want. You just have to take another vote. The final thing I'll say, well, not the final thing, but one other thing I'll say about implementation is that we sometimes get asked how much freedom do you have in exempting certain developments. Now, I've just been explaining to you a whole bunch of freedom you have in setting your SDC, but all of that freedom that I've just been describing is predicated on the idea that you're kind of treating all types of customers equally. You can run into trouble when you start exempting certain customers or certain categories of customers in ways that kind of look arbitrary. Now, in statute, there are specific get out of jail free cards under certain very carefully worded circumstances where you can do that, and that mostly has to do with multifamily for affordable housing. But we would encourage you, for the most part, all customers that are similarly situated need to be treated the same. One of the things that's not on this slide, but I'll mention it anyway, is the process from going from here to adopting something, whatever number you wish to choose. There is a 90-day notice that is required. Any interested party or party that you could reasonably expect might be interested in what you're doing should be given a notice 90 days in advance of the scheduled public hearing before an SDC is considered for adoption. And we're going to close with something that staff asked us to put together. We understand that the SDCs you're considering or will be considered, the SDCs we're communicating to you, exist in the context of a city that charges its own SDCs independently. And we just wanted to put in front of you what those are so that you can be aware of them. And these are the SDCs are expected to increase at the beginning of the new fiscal year. And with that, John and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Good, thank you.
Good presentation.
Who would like to start? I see a list. Chair Tankersley.
Yes, couple things. Focus first on our Willamette project. You said the treatment plant, but does that include the transmission line as well?
I don't have that in front of
So
me.
James?
on the project list, yes, the project for the treatment plant does include.
Oh, so that's the whole project.
The
Good,
entire
good. Thank you.
There's subject lines under those.
Okay, and now, I understand you've already talked to John about this, but that should increase the capacity over what you use to calculate in your formula, right?
You go back to
So if you go back to your
meter
future,
equivalents right there.
30 million.
right? So we'd now be at 40 million, not 30 million, and that would actually make the SDC smaller, wouldn't it?
Potentially. So this issue came up just a few days ago,
Mhm.
and it's not clear that that's what would happen, because build out is predicated on a system-wide capacity of 30 MGD, and the question is, are you may be talking about a particular project that might increase the capacity of a particular function, but does it increase system-wide capacity? So that is something that we're happy to explore further.
And I realize that we also don't know exactly how much of that would go to us and how much would go to wholesale sales. So maybe, but if any of it goes to us, to our system, then that would reduce the number to some degree. And I realize we're not talking about a number today, but I just want to understand how this works. So,
Commissioner Gorman.
So in my mind, that whole concept came about because of redundancy and an event related to losing the dams. In my mind, that is nothing more than a standby generator of water when we have a failure here. So I hadn't thought of it as adding additional capacity.
well, that was one of the reasons, but as I recall, we got two old minds here, as I recall, part of it was too, that we realized that we were not going to get any more water out of the Coast Range because you wouldn't be able to get another impoundment. And this looked like the other way to have capacity in the future, not even one generation ahead, probably a couple of generations ahead. Because I don't know where else the water would come from.
If we grow beyond the 30 million gallons.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had never looked at.
You're
the
right
way-
about the redundancy.
But
That was
so-
discussed.
So remember, our water rights, we have close to 50 million gallons on the Willamette on the water rights.
Well, but some of them don't count.
Right.
So the other the $4.5 million of water rights is the Willamette water rights, right? He listed $4.5 million.
Should be more
on
than
his-
that. Could be 3 and 3, wasn't it? Where's that? Am I missing it?
No, it had to do with the calculation. I saw it where you
He
showed,
did have it. I saw it
I
somewhere.
saw it in there.
It was what was eligible, right?
Water
there.
rights right there. So the original cost of 4.4 million. So if those, I can't imagine we went back and found out what the water rights cost us
For the coast range.
for the coast range, because it probably didn't cost anything hardly. So that shouldn't that all be future? If we're not using them now?
It is future in the sense that the cost that we have identified a portion of the cost that represents what future users will be using of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
but so if those water rights are not in use in our system at all now, why isn't that 100%?
Yeah.
Are you talking about Willamette rights or the other rights?
The Willamette rights, because I can't imagine those are the coast range rights that cost us $4 million.
Yeah, because the Willamette rights cost us more than that.
So I don't know where that number came from, but to the
Yeah.
extent that, and maybe there may have been some costs that were incurred when we raised the dam that they capitalized for that. I don't know.
remember that.
There was something about they had to, but it wasn't, we didn't get new water rights. It was impoundment rights. Maybe it was.
Well, it was storage rights because
Yeah.
we were storing more water.
So maybe that's where that came from.
Yeah.
And then if that's what that is, then that's fine. Okay.
Hey, do we have an annual fee for Walker Flats that we have to pay also? Maintain that water, right?
I don't think we have an annual.
It's just physical, moving water.
Yeah.
And I guess to Ed's point, that to the extent that the Willamette source is redundancy for the current use, then that wouldn't be 100%.
Right.
Okay. So if I and then you want me to keep going? Okay.
Yeah.
So zone 2, as I understand it, zone 2 development would pay the basic SDCs that everybody else pays, whether they're in different parts of the city. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Under the uniform charge, and really, as we've calculated, under any scenario, zone 2 pays the same SDC everyone else does.
Okay.
Okay, hold on one second, Commissioner Gormley.
Okay, now I thought zone 2, we have never established a firm and final position. That, in my mind, is a build out by developers, and they've
Right.
got to cover. The only thing that we were going to do is possibly help finance it. So wouldn't that be, wouldn't
So-
they be exempt from that because they're actually
Well-
building that infrastructure?
They would be. That's why they're just paying the base charge that everybody else pays.
Okay, all right, okay.
I guess other developers would pay to put the piping in their system.
Right. Who build the homes.
Okay.
But there's still, to your point, there's still a whole system that they have to contribute to.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
So now on more basic questions. How did you value the historical component? Like the existing system?
Historical cost.
Historical cost and so did you figure useful life on that for the rest of it? I mean, some of those pipes that you have historical cost on the ground, somebody 20 years from now probably won't ever use that.
No,
So-
is the answer to that question.
Okay,
I
and
can-
I,
and
I
I can-
realize this is not an exact science. I understand that. But I just
Well, we
want to
have-
understand
sorry.
where the room to, okay,
I can expound on that a little bit.
great.
We have a couple of choices, and what the law says is you can consider cost or value as that reimbursement fee basis. So our alternative would be replacement cost less depreciation as an estimate of value. That would give us a higher number, probably in our view, maybe overvalue the system for its value to a new user. So we use a more conservative approach and just take original cost without adjusting for depreciation. And so that is a measure of cost instead of value. And that's how we got there.
That makes sense to me in the sense that it's a lot cheaper to calculate. And second, the existing users have already gotten benefit from it too. So, okay, now what happens when SDCs are collected? Do they have to be put in a separate bank account or just accounted for separately?
So yes, mainly they have to be accounted for separately.
And almost universally that they are in there is an SDC fund that accounts for the revenues and expenditures of SDCs.
And could we then spend the money we've collected on the projects that are listed in the notice, like the transmission, the completed water transmission line? Can we use, if we had SDCs that came in, can we use them to pay for that kind of project? But nothing else, right? It's got to be something that's listed, not just a new capital project.
And any project that you spend SDC improvement fee dollars on needs to be on the list of projects that lies underneath this summary that you see.
Okay. That makes sense. And so then if we came up with something new we discovered we had to do, we would have to go back and recalculate the SDCs to spend SDC money on that, or once you
I have some good news for you.
Good questions.
So the answer is no, you don't have to. You can. But there's a more streamlined way. You are free to add projects to your project list at any time. It just takes, the governing board just takes action. You put it on the consent calendar if you wanted to. You add it to the project list. You are now this works under a couple circumstances. Number one, this assumes that you're not trying to raise the SDC as a result of doing that. If you don't care about raising the SDC, then it's no problem to add something to the list. When you do add something to the list, you are still responsible to apply an appropriate eligibility percentage. So you still, this eligibility that we have over here, you still have to figure that out for the new thing. But as long as you do that and you don't care about raising your SDC, you can add projects whenever you want.
Okay, and you could, does that mean that you can only pay the eligibility percentage of the cost of, say, the transmission line? Okay.
That's exactly what it means.
Great.
From the improvement fee pot of money.
Yes.
Now, reimbursement fees are a much more flexible pot of money, and it's one critical reason why to go back to the accounting issue, you must account for improvement fee and reimbursement fee separately and know how much you have of each at any given time, because reimbursement fees can be spent on any water-related project, irrespective of whether growth made it necessary or not. But improvement fee, you are restricted to that list of projects and to the eligibility of each one.
Okay, interesting. The 5% is making more sense now.
Yeah.
And finally, I promise, how does this impact the cost of service study? Would it tend to say that your cost of service is going to go down because we won't have some of the capital costs coming out of rates?
Alas, technically, yes, but not nearly as much as you might hope.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Tate. Looks like you have a list of questions as well.
Yes, I'm keeping some notes for myself, but Tom did a great job of going over a lot of things that we have been thinking about, so I appreciate that. I think the only couple things on my list were to just talk about what the normal process is for people that are currently doing SDCs, as far as how often are they are they doing an assessment like this? And is this the only process that can be used to do that assessment, to get to that ceiling, to get to that number?
So are you asking about kind of the process for updating your SDC periodically?
Yes, and how frequently do people do that? And is this the only mechanism for doing that?
Boy, that's interesting. I want to know more about what you mean by that. But so one way to do it is certainly anytime you update a master plan, that is perhaps the most convenient and best time to update your SDC, because your project list is changing, and you often have a consulting engineer that can provide much needed data to your SDC consultant, and that can save staff time. So whenever you go through a master planning process, that's a great time to do your SDCs. In the absence of that, practices vary widely. But our recommendation would tend to be, around every 5 years or so for a full recalculation. However, the law also allows for indexing SDCs, and this is something you should take full advantage of. You can apply an index, and we often use, the construction cost index in the engineering news record. You can use an index to create annual adjustments that they're not designed to make you more money. They're designed to hedge price risk for the things that you have to buy. And in that spirit, the index may move up, it may move down sometimes, and we would certainly encourage you to make whatever adjustment is warranted by the move in the index. So that's kind of a shortcut to adjusting your SDCs, but that index adjustment is not based upon any of the underlying math. John, I saw you getting ready to get into the game there a second ago. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, you covered it. The indexing was the key thing there, that in between updates, you want to do that index. That'll be a specific recommendation in our report as well. So if you do choose to go forward, that would be something that you can do administratively every year, just to keep pace with inflation.
Now I'm dying to find out if that answers your question, or if you had something specific in mind for a different process for doing your SDCs.
Well, is this the only, to hire a firm like yours and go through this process, is that the only way to establish an SDC?
No, not at all. It's typically it is the typical way for, if you have a smaller staff and you can't find the staff time or kind of the depth of knowledge of the law, it is normal to hire an SDC consultant, but there's no legal reason or a moral reason why that is necessary. If you have the time and you have the knowledge, you can do this in-house, no problem.
And one of our deliverables will be the spreadsheet. So you can do that update. Most of our clients 5 years from now will have forgotten all this stuff, and they'll call us or someone like us. But yeah, you're absolutely welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the question was kind of coming from the standpoint of the citizens asking, what was the process that we used to come to this number, and how does that get substantiated, and is that a normal process that most communities go through to get to this, versus is it just something that we calculated ourselves and came up with? So just
very standard.
Yeah.
Very standard process.
And you'll have the privilege of explaining to them that this is an area where you can't just charge what feels right and what makes sense to you. This is very legally constrained. And so that is a key reason why consultants get hired for this.
Commissioner Gormley?
Isn't there an annual an adjustment you can make legally based on some index?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that is the indexing that we mentioned a moment ago.
Okay.
Okay.
Additional questions?
No, I'm good.
Commissioner Gormley, do you have questions?
No.
Could you go back to the very beginning when you were talking about your calculations for projected growth and
Yeah.
help me understand that a little better? That 63% seems high, and I know you said it doesn't matter when we get to that number, just that this is based on that total capacity. However, what is the root of the projected growth, as opposed to just kind of so if we're looking at, if you're looking at the number of households or population, if you look at our population growth numbers, and we don't have an estimated 63% increase, and even if we did, it wouldn't equate to the same number of households or the same, number of system users. So could you just help me understand how we got to that?
I'd be happy to.
Number? Thanks.
I'd be happy to. So here are the kind of the fixed. There are 3 fixed points, and we use those to find the 4th point. So in 2021, we know that based upon our analysis of the meters in service, you had 14,006 meter capacity equivalents. Okay, that is the quantification of your current customer base. We also know that at the same time, you had maximum daily demand of 11.25 million gallons per day. So if you take this number, the 14,000 meter capacity equivalents, and you divide that by that demand, you have a certain ratio. And if you then multiply that ratio by your build out of 30 million gallons per day, you calculated how many meter capacity equivalents you will have at that time, assuming that, and this is what the little gray box over here is for, assuming that maximum daily demand per meter capacity equivalent will remain constant. That's a reasonable assumption. But this is just math. We don't know actually how many accounts this will represent. We don't know if this is residential or commercial. We just know that that at 30 MGD, you will be serving 37,348 meter capacity equivalents.
So you know where the
Thank
30
you.
comes from? That's the capacity of the plant.
That's the
Yeah.
capacity of the watershed.
Yeah.
Of the
Capacity
watershed?
of the watershed, the capacity.
Just to be clear, because I know how this plays into other discussions about projects. 30 is a system-wide capacity.
Yeah, it's the capacity of our watershed, that's what it can produce. Currently, our treatment plant can only produce 22 million gallons. To build out the capacity of the treatment plant, we would have to add filters 7 and 8.
And that would put us to 30.
And that would put us to 30.
And that 30 is really based on current technologies.
30 is based on, yes, our
If
current
there's some
treatment
new
process.
whiz bang way comes.
Well, you still can't, get any more water out. It's 30 is 30. That's what the
Require more
engineer,
acreage or things like
Yeah.
that.
we would require more watershed area to produce more water, essentially. So that is the 30 million gallons is actually what the engineer estimates out of the watershed.
Based on average annual rainfall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
This year's exception.
Yeah, way more an exception.
And as a follow-up to that, if we suddenly got a big user,
Mhm. Yeah. This number would go up.
but that big user would just be meter capacity equivalents, right? Unless it changed if it changed the mix.
It wouldn't, when you mean mix between like residential or
Yeah.
commercial, it wouldn't matter because it's all based on meter equivalent. So it would be the size of the meter that they use.
But as I understand it, your meter size is the maximum flow.
Through the meter, right?
And if somebody started to use, I guess if we're gonna build it for the maximum flow, it doesn't matter, does it?
Right.
Okay, thank you. answer that question.
If I may, and there's one point to make here, you probably already understand this, but you see those flow factors associated with each meter size, that that base system development charge of about $10,000 is for the 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch meter, as Doug mentioned. If you had a customer come in that needed a 4-inch meter because of their demand, let's say it's an industrial customer, or a 6-inch meter, they're going to pay, in the case of the 4-inch meter, 16.67 times the base SDC, and a 6-inch meter would pay 33.33 times that base SDC. So those numbers go up substantially based on the capacity that they will need. If they're pumping water all day long, they're going to see it in their water rates. In addition, that will reflect their demands from day to day.
Thank you.
And then one other thing to note, the 5/8 meters, we don't install 5/8 meters anymore. So those eventually, as we replace our meters with ERT meters, will go away out of the system.
And then my other question is if you could expand a little bit on the exemptions. So you mentioned affordable housing exemptions, and the city also has SDC exemptions for everything except parks for affordable housing projects. And so I was wondering if you could just kind of expand on that. You had said, you mentioned just multifamily, but could you talk about what the law allows and doesn't allow in terms of any policy that the board may or may not be interested in setting up in the future?
So the specific statute that I had in mind was a relatively new law. Now I think it's more than a couple of years old at this point, but it's fairly new in SDC times, where there are under certain specific circumstances, multifamily developments that are specifically targeted, at least in part, to affordable housing or to lower income residents, can be offered waiver of SDCs, and I point that out as the kind of example where it's okay to do that because statute specifically allows it, and as opposed to making an exception for other reasons where statute does not protect you, but you may think it's good policy, but you run a risk of developments that have paid in full freight into the SDC, whatever full freight being defined as whatever you decide to impose. You have the risk of them saying, well, hey, we paid our fair share, somebody else isn't paying their fair share, and there's no legal reason why they shouldn't. This is why we're not getting the infrastructure that we needed to get. And so what we would encourage you to do is really consult with your attorney to make sure that anything that you're offering is going to be okay.
So I heard you use specific language too. You said it's a waiver, not an exemption, right? And that's important. Is that?
I don't think I said that.
It's not so much the language. Sorry.
Well, I'm asking that because it had come up in previous conversations when we were evaluating affordable housing exemptions or waivers for the city of McMinnville, and that specific language as a fine point had been brought up, that it was there was a safer way to do it. And I don't recall which it was, if it was to waive FDCs or exempt from them.
The way that's really safe is to bring money. So if you have a source of funding other than SDCs that can be used to pay the SDC on behalf of a development, that buys you a lot of flexibility and freedom. So if you're bringing money to the table from another source, yeah, you can pretty much do whatever you want. We would say
Yeah.
This is my specialty.
we would say that that for the most part, statutory exemptions notwithstanding, or setting that aside, any kind of waiver or exemption should be based upon cost considerations. And what that means is if you have a remodeling job going on where it's, it may be adding square footage to the building, but they're not needing to upgrade their meter, well, then there's no SDC due because they have the same meter that they had before. That's a cost-based reason not to charge an SDC, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I might just jump in here for a second. And what we'll need to do if the commission decides to go forward with the SEC is the commission will need to adopt an underlying rule. City of McMinnville has an SDC rule, general rules for SDCs and ordinances for sewer, park, transportation, but they don't apply to water because the commission provides water. But so there'll need to be a rule adopted as part of this process to provide for the rules for appeals, for notice provisions, for all the rights, underlying rights that have to be in place for an SDC to exist. In that, what our consultants are talking about is the SDC statute itself does not provide for a waiver or reduction of SDCs. However, in the land use code in chapter 197, there is a provision that actually requires waiver or reduction if the city imposes an affordable housing requirement on a development. So if the city imposes as part of a land use approval that so much of the housing will be affordable, will be price capped, somehow price controlled, then actually the statute requires SDC and fees to either be waived or reduced. So it's something we would have to build into our rule because it's state law.
And that would apply to ours, not just the cities, because we're the city too.
Yeah, we are the city now.
And I think all we're suggesting is if you were to go beyond that minimum requirement that those SDCs foregone because you're providing exemptions or waivers, those should be backfilled with other revenue. Basically, you shouldn't be just subsidizing those customers with the SDCs of others absent that statutory authorization.
Right, and it's a specific statute, and it would require, or it would be imposed as a land use requirement. So we would know. I mean, it wouldn't be like, oh, well, is it there? Is it not there? It would be, it would be part of the order, not created by this commission, but.
So do I understand that if somebody came in and it was a federally funded low-income project that the city didn't require to be low income, the statute might not allow us to waive that or exempt it?
Well, if you're asking me, and I don't want to jump in here, I don't think I would quite say it like that. I would, one of the things that we have to do when calculating SDCs is follow rate making principles. So as Doug described, you can't just give, in our view, you can't just give someone an exemption or a waiver on their SDCs unless they are going to demand less water and they need a smaller meter and they need a smaller share of system capacity. That's what rate making principles are all about. So now to say that you couldn't provide them a waiver or an exemption, probably, we do see agencies that do that, even though we would have advised them not to in following our interpretation of the statute. Where you're safest is where the law requires you to provide those exemptions or waivers for qualifying low-income development.
Yeah, this is sort of a safe haven where you can sort of otherwise, I mean, I would agree with our consultant that rate making principles, but this sort of, there's always exceptions, to to,
And is there a rule that you have to treat everybody the same unless there's a statutory exemption or exception?
well, I think it goes back to general rate making
Okay.
principles of reasonableness, you know,
Okay.
clicks versus the city of Dallas.
Okay, okay,
The Dallas, I think it is.
thank
Okay.
you.
Very good.
Additional questions?
Enjoy it. Very good presentation.
All right, well, thank you
Right.
very much for your time.
Can
Oh,
I
please.
ask a question though, before our consultants leave? In that you're talking about the deliverables in your presentation, I understand in the statute, eventually, if the commissioner were to adopt an SDC, they have to adopt the methodology. They have to adopt by resolution methodology. That's your deliverable? Is that
Mhm.
methodology? Okay. so
Yes,
coming back with a report saying this is the official methodology that's being adopted by the commission at the time of putting the SDC in place.
that's right.
Just want to make that clear.
And
And-
that, sorry, Doug, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and just as you were alerted to a minute ago, I think the word that was used was you need a rule, and that often takes the form of an ordinance, some kind of enabling legislation at the local level that allows you to impose SDCs in the first place, and that will not be part of our methodology,
Right.
but you definitely need that.
Right. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, very helpful.
Thank you. Take care.
And I think we're going to move into new business and invite up Jamie Phillips on Oregon Clean Fuels Program.
So Mayor, really quick, can we get a little clarification from the commission on the next steps on this?
Oh,
Do we
I'm
want to
sorry.
Bring the rule
Yeah, no.
forward for consideration.
I-
Proceed.
I would like to discuss it. I mean, I think if we did it, we'd need to refine the study based on some things, but that could be done. But I would like to discuss whether we want to do it or not. And I don't think we have time tonight to do that, but I'd like to do it soon.
We can come back. We can bring, maybe Trina, what we could do is bring back the study. That the report that they do for the commission to review. Does that make sense?
Is that the methodology?
Yes,
And then also discuss,
and have a draft.
discuss the concept of whether we want to do this and sort of an idea of how much we'd want to charge and how we wanted to phase it, and if we wanted to do it and what the implications were for our customers, the community with affordable housing.
Yeah, I think it would be good to
Short-term
review what
versus-
the city's doing
Yeah.
in terms of their policy as well, to see if there's a desire for alignment. And even though that was clear, the recommendation was don't do that, you know.
Sure, and also think about, short-term versus long-term. In other words, is it appropriate to say, well, we want to keep a housing affordable and not charge but then we have to think about, well, people's part of their housing costs are the cost for utilities, and maybe they won't be able to do this. So I think we should look at all those things. And I think it's, there's an hour or so of robust discussion, I think, available there.
I'd like to understand too, how it if there's any tie into the rate increases that we've looked at, going forward, and how that might impact that or change our thoughts about rate increases if we were collecting SCCs for existing customers. I don't know.
Might be worthwhile after, as we get a little farther along, to pay for an hour or so of Mark Beauchamp's time on Zoom to ask him if we did this, would that have an appreciable impact? I think it's a theoretical impact, but maybe the dollars are so small.
I think they said that they were.
Didn't Mark
small.
do something for us quite a few years ago? We kind of just had a discussion one night or something.
I
And
think it was these guys actually,
It was just
Well,
But Mark talked about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I think, we could have Mark come. I think the impact's gonna be small,
But just to give us an idea
Right.
of
what the
that
impact
would
will be.
I think you
Right.
still need to have I feel like it's necessary to have a good, clear
Right.
explanation to the public about
Yes.
Why?
SDCs and rate increases and how those
Mhm.
impact each other, and how that.
But our rate increases are driven by our rate methodology, which is all about what costs to produce a gallon or a cubic
Right.
foot of water.
Sure.
It's almost like whole thing separate. historically SDCs have been all about capital.
But our rates are tied in with capital too, and timber revenue has been what's been driving capital. But timber revenue, if you go back and look, our timber revenue is very flat.
But we also need
Costs are
to,
going up.
and we did this for years, what if we didn't have timber?
Right.
And,
No, I
and we
think
get
that's
it,
important.
and that's why the
Yeah.
water rates got to where they were. It's like, we don't have timber revenue, we still got to produce a gallon of water, so.
And Mark talked too about, as we ramp up on
Yeah.
the Willamette project, where the rates would have to get very, very high to pay for that as you went.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So Trina, does that give you something to work with?
Yeah, another thing might be is that the FCS contract is coming up. It's gonna expire, isn't it, Trina?
It is in June. Yes, the end of June.
And so that's probably something that's gonna need to come back, because if the commission is gonna go forward with the SDCs, we probably want to keep the
mhm,
consultant on board
Sure.
to the point where
Yeah.
there's action taken, I would think.
right.
So we need to extend that as well.
Well,
And extend it, but going back to Tom's point also, we may want to look at those meter equivalents and the build out that we talked about, with the Willamette.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could tweak
that
those
number a little
numbers, and again, this as Mark Beauchamp talks about the cost of service, it's not an exact science.
And it's
We'll
gonna
have to make a
change.
guess.
When we do our master plan, it'll change again.
Right.
so we could bring back next month some type of contract extension.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
okay. You have enough there, Trina?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we're able to have,
Deer in the headlights?
if we're able to have the discussion and then decide if we want to move forward with it or not, I think that will give us the information we need to decide whether we need to extend the contract or not. Because if the commission has a discussion and isn't interested in moving forward, then there's no point in extending contract past June.
We've just been dodging this.
Years,
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah. So I will definitely put it on next month's agenda.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. All right. We will now talk about the Oregon Clean Fuels Program. Please welcome.
Thank you. Yes, so by now I think the commission has heard me speak about the DEQ Clean Fuel Program a few times, and McMinnville has been participating in the program since 2019, and every year we receive an allocation or a deposit of clean fuel credits. We have received our allocation for 2022, calendar year 2022, in the amount of 1,156 clean fuel credits. And last year I was here and the commission declared a surplus, a quantity of 1,544, I believe, clean fuel credits. We then sold all but 279 of those in the past year. So this evening I would like to ask the commission to approve a resolution to declare as surplus the 1,156 clean fuel credits issued for 2022 and redeclare the remaining 279 clean fuel credits from 2021 as surplus and delegate authority to the general manager to approve a sale pursuant to our contracting policy and authorize the staff, mayor, and the clerk to execute documents as necessary should an opportunity for sale arise.
Thank you. Are there any questions to start? No, not hearing any, I would entertain a motion.
So moved,
This is
resolution.
this is resolution number 2023-1, a resolution by the city of McMinnville acting by and through its Water and Light Commission declaring clean fuel credits surplus and authorizing delegating the general manager authority to sell clean fuel credits. 2023-1.
Wow.
Yeah.
First one.
Wow.
Right, so do I have a motion to approve? Commissioner Gormley? Motion to approve
Second.
and a second from Commissioner Tate. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Mayor, can I pull?
Oh, you want
one?
to poll the council or
Yes,
the
please.
board? Sorry. Commission?
Mayor Drapkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gormley,
Aye.
Commissioner Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie, quick question. Do we get credit for plug-in hybrids too, or just?
Yes.
Yeah.
We do. And one point of clarification in the memo, I mentioned that McMinnville, the Current EV count is approximately 380. I've since received updated information. It's 405.
There's
So,
not one.
a little bit of growth.
Maybe you can pick up.
Oh,
All right, thank you very much. And we would now ask Marcy Humley to join us to talk about the proposed resolution on regarding paid leave Oregon.
Afternoon. Back in January, I came to the commission to say that there was a possibility of purchasing insurance through the Hartford to satisfy the requirements of Oregon's new paid leave program. Since that time, Oregon has approved Hartford's equivalent plan. This allows us to move forward to purchase this insurance from Hartford. Our next step is to provide Hartford with a tax services agreement for both parts of the plan. So there's a paid medical leave portion and a paid family leave portion of the plan. And in return, Hartford will provide us with a policy that we can then provide to the state. And that policy would start in September. That's the time when our employees can start making claims against that. And that's also the time when we would start deductions from our employees' paychecks for their portion of the premium.
So we're not doing any deductions at this point, not until we implement this.
And the employees save money too, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, it's quite a bit cheaper than the state plan.
Good job. Thank you.
So resolution again, okay.
Yeah, would you like to read 2302?
Yeah, this is resolution number 2023-2, a resolution by Water and Light Commission of the City of MW&L Municipal Corporation, State of Oregon, approving tax services agreements with the Hartford Financial Services Group, Inc.
Move for the adoption.
Thank, I have a motion to adopt from Commissioner Gormley
Second,
and a second from Chair Tankersley. Please poll the commission.
Yes, Mayor Dropkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Tankersley,
aye.
Commissioner Gormley,
Aye.
Commissioner Tate.
Aye.
And the resolution is adopted unanimously. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much. And we'll now turn it over to our general manager, John Dietz, to talk about the Northwest Public Power Association voting delegates.
yes. So both, I think, Commissioners Tankersley and Tate are attending the annual NWPPA meeting in Anchorage, Alaska this year. And so as we're a member, we also have a voting right. And so the commission needs to appoint a voting delegate to that body. And I believe Commissioner Tankersley has volunteered to do that.
So Tom isn't already voting because of his capacity as a board member?
No,
Correct.
there's a board meeting. I will vote as a board member, but
But for our vote as
for us to
McMinnville,
vote at
The business
The
meeting.
members.
it is,
meeting,
okay. I'll so
Yes.
move.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley and a second from Commissioner Tate to appoint Chair Tankersley to be the voting delegate for Northwest Public Power Association conference. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. And the motion passes unanimously. And do we have any general manager comments?
I do. So just to let the commission know, the flocculator that I declared an emergency on has been repaired. And when they were repairing it, they actually found in one of the other stages, and if I'm correct, Ryan, stage 2 or stage 3, some other welds that were cracked, and they repaired those at the same time. Total cost of that repair was about $53,000. That was parts and labor. So that's been completed.
Who did that for us?
It was, who was the company? R.L. Reimer was but who was the one that we purchased the parts from? West Tech. So West Tech and R.L. Reimer. Also, the drain valve for Haskins has been repaired, and the cost for that temporarily repaired. And the cost for that was about $6,100. And so in next year's budget, you'll see a line item for replacement of that gate. And Ryan is working on that project.
So we'll schedule that when we drop the water.
Yeah, when we lower the reservoir level. Yeah, we drain the reservoir.
Had we, I mean, Should we get somebody already scheduled to do that? Just so get on the calendar because
Yeah, I
get
think,
it out to bid or something.
yeah, Ryan's working on getting some estimates so we can get
Okay.
that in our
Yeah,
budget, so we can get
get
that going.
that.
We need to get the gates ordered, or the gate order, so we have it when they're ready.
Are the gates available or are you gonna have to? manufacture? Okay,
So it's
I mean,
not too bad.
12 weeks becomes 15, becomes 18. and-
Well, and the other thing is, we're talking about also buying a spare, so we have one on site,
Sure.
you know, if we have a problem again. So I think we should have one, because it's obviously a critical piece, so. And then also, just so the commission knows, we were within $1 million of our LGIP cap. So, yeah, so Mark, instituted, we, did $4 million worth of treasuries to get us below the cap, so we can, because we have timber revenue coming in as well here in the next couple months. So we did, a $2 million 6-month bond, treasury bond, and a $2 million 1-year treasury bond. Those interest rates were actually a little bit higher than
Close to 5%.
yeah, 4.89 for one and 4.5 for the other. So
Crazy. It's crazy.
and then I think Trina wanted me to remind the commission that you're going to be having calls with our consultant on partnering with the city the next 2 days. Wednesday, Thursday, Trina, is that correct?
Catch us if you can, so to speak.
So,
Got mine
Yes.
at 11:30
you've
and
already got it down. I like it.
last time I was driving, oh my God, they're calling me. I forgot about it.
Yeah, so those are my updates.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments from commissioners?
No, I really enjoyed the SEC stuff. It's just good update.
Anything you? I just got word a couple hours ago that our Third Street Improvement Project was one that Congresswoman Salinas chose to move forward as one of the 15 projects she's selected to get some congressionally delegated spending. So keep your fingers crossed that that continues to make its way through and
It's great.
and so, yeah, that's, and I believe we might get another recommendation also on the Senate side, and those are actually two separate.
So Tom,
votes,
you and the mayor probably need to go visit Kevin McCarthy to make sure we get this. So, tell me you're independent. not Democrat.
And our Irish person.
And let's see, we have financial information. Commissioners had a chance to review.
Yes.
Yes, great, wonderful. And then I would ask our legal counsel to read us into executive session.
So we're going to go into executive session tonight pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub F to consider information and records that are exempt from public disclosure under ORS 192.345.23 relating to information revealing security measures to protect information processing. We have any media with us tonight. They're cautioned not to share information from the executive session to the public. We will be coming back. All right. Do we need to come back with open session?
Romy, are we coming back in the open session?
Oh, no, we're not coming back.
No, we shouldn't.
We will not come in back in open session at the end of the executive session. There will be no further action taken by the commission tonight. Good afternoon.